add a dependency and everything just works. But how does it actually work internally? In interviews, this question tests whether you understand Spring beyond annotations. So, in previous video, we saw that @Spring Boot application includes @enable auto configuration. Now let's understand what that really does. When Spring starts, it looks for the classpath dependencies, and on those dependencies, Spring Boot loads auto configuration classes based on entries in meta-inf configuration files. It basically scans all the imports in that in this particular path. In older version, it used Spring factories. Spring does not blindly configure everything. It uses conditions like conditional on class, condition on missing bean, condition on property. I'll take simple example of Spring Data JPA. If I have a POC where I want to connect to SQL Server, so in my Spring Boot application, here I'll give you a simple example of how I'm connecting to database. I have Spring Boot started data JPA. Here I haven't mentioned anywhere to create a data source. So how it data source bean is created, which is required to connect to database. So in this Spring Boot starter data JPA, it automatically downloads all the dependencies required by it using transitive dependencies. So my JDBC dependency is downloaded using only this dependency. And here, as I mentioned, in this meta-inf, I have all the imports that are required by this dependency. So all the classes are mentioned here, and I'll go in data source auto configuration class. In data source auto configuration is only created if these conditions are satisfied. So condition on class. So if we have data source dot class and or like condition on missing bin, if we don't have the bin of this type, then create a bin of data source auto configuration. Also enable configuration properties like this data source properties. If I go here and if I have Spring data source properties, if this condition satisfies, it will create a bean, and I have given the configuration in my property files. So if I show you, here I have given the configuration of my database. So these data source properties are created using these properties from property files. That condition satisfies for this enable configuration properties, and then data source auto configuration is created. So that's how it is done. So basically you have Spring Boot Spring Boot application. It has enable auto configuration. It reads the auto configuration imports, loads the data source auto configuration, checks for the conditions, reads the application.properties file, and creates the data source bean. And that's how JPA works. So this is how your auto configuration works internally.